Hi, it's Sasha here from Marent Crafts, and in today's tutorial we're going to be looking at a Vlieseline product, also known as a violin stabiliser called Quilters Grid. Now Quilters Grid is a fusible interfacing, so it's fusible on one side. Now one side you will feel it almost has like a spotted effect. You can really feel the glue dots on there. And then on the other side, it has your 1-inch grid. Now this is great if you are just a beginner and you are starting out on your quilting journey, or even if you are somebody that has been sewing for an awfully long time, but really just needs to make a quick and easy lap quilt, baby quilt, bag, cushion panel, anything quick and easy. So the great thing about this grid is it is done in 1-inch squares, and they're clearly marked as well, so you've got no problems with the visibility there. And even when you're working from the fusible side, you can still see those gridded lines. Now I'm going to be working with 2-inch squares, but you can work with 1-inch square scraps. If you're somebody like me that hoards your scraps, you can really make the use out of all of those smaller pieces by using your inch scraps, 2-inch, 3-inch. I mean, you could even go up to 6, 7 or 8-inch squares if you wanted to make a large quilt. Now the benefit of this product is that you are going to get all of your lines lining up, and it's really hard to do that when you start out sewing, and it's all about your precision on your cutting, your piecing, your stitching, your stitch length, your seam allowance, and even down to the way that you iron. So this makes everything much more easier. You're going to find that your seams are all beautifully in line, and all of those corners match up as well. So I've cut some 2-inch squares, and basically you're going to lay them out in design that you feel is best. Now with this grid you can do a bargello technique, you could also do a ombre waterfall technique, or you can even have a go at pixelated panels. And pixelation is really in the moment in the whole quilt world, and how we make portrait pictures, cartoon pictures, but using graph paper you can create your own pixelated images. So by popping the squares, the fabric squares that I've got inside of the grid, bearing in mind that I'm doing 2-inch squares, you are just going to place them on the fused side. And obviously at home, I would always recommend that you use some sort of grease-proof paper or a tea towel or something like that over the top, because you have got the whole area which is glued, and no matter how hard you try, you will get glue on your iron. So it is best to cover this. Obviously today I'm not going to be covering it, I'm just going to be going really careful because you need to see the process at home. So this is where your own creativity can come into it. You can really have fun. This also means that you can use lace, velvets, satins, anything like that, just to have a play, but using squares. Some people think that squares are the easiest thing to start with quilting, and that is the case, but it's also very difficult to get them lined up. And this product takes that difficulty away. So what I do suggest is that every couple of lines you do, you just give it a very light pressing just to hold it in place, but enough so that if you need to reheat it, you can then pull those fabrics away and actually play around again. So very lightly I'm going to press and hold and press and hold. And this means I'm just fusing those fabrics to the grid enough to keep them in place. And then I can carry on. And we're going to be stitching these together with a 1/4 inch stitch. And again, you can go as little or as big as you want. You can actually make a 40-inch by 40-inch quilt top in around 45 minutes. It's actually a really, really quick process. So the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to trim off the excess so you can actually see. So just by trimming off the excess, it just means that it's less glue to go through the sewing machine, and also if you're going to give it another quick press, just to make sure that all those corners are caught down. And as I say, you can do this as big or as little. You know, we could do coasters with this size, we could do a panel in a bag in this size. It really is depending on what you want to have a go at. So we're just going to go all the way over the back just to make sure that that's fused nicely. And then we're going to take it over to the sewing machine. Now when you take it over to the sewing machine, we're going to be using 1/4 inch stitch, and we are going to be going across the lines. Doesn't matter which way, whether you go up to down first or whether you go across. It makes no difference, but whichever way you decide to go, do all of the across ones first and then change direction. It just makes for an easier seam on the back. So the first thing I'm going to do is to fold that first line, and I'm going to follow that line for my stitching. I'm just going to line that up to the edge of my 1/4 inch on my walking foot, and sew right the way down through. And what you will see is if you haven't quite lined up within the square, you've got a 1/4 inch wriggle room there. So you can quite easily, if you're just under, make sure that everything will still be lined up, basically, because you've got that wiggle room to play with. And we're going to carry on going down. And then the last one for this way, and you're just going to make sure that's lined up really, really well. Make sure that we're not going off the line. So we're going to go now onto the last line, and we're going to follow that line again. So we're going to make sure that's folded really well, so that line is on the edge. And we're going to go all the way down on that one. And then quickly just give it a press on those seams so they're all going in the same direction. And then we are going to go from left to right again to do the across seams. And we're going to make sure that those seams are all in the right direction. So I tend to place this where my seams are going down, so it means my sewing needle is going over the top and it's not picking this up, so you're not getting any puckering on the back. So if you are somebody that has a quilt shop, for example, this is a great way of getting somebody that comes into the shop that wants to start their patchwork journey in having a go, because it's so quick, simple and easy. It's great for classes, but it's also great for somebody to have at home in their stash, because you never know, somebody will turn up and say, oh, can you make me a cushion cover, or can you make me a quilt top? And so just by doing all of those squares, you might think it's quite easy, but it looks really effective when it's done. And it also means that all those favourite fabrics that you've got, you can keep a little bit of it, all those scraps that you've got. So as you can see, I'm just going to give this a press again. And so all of those lines line up beautifully. You've got really good clear corners, and then once it's all pressed and flat, you can pop this as an inlay into a bag panel, a wall hanging, or just make yourself a lap quilt. Thank you for joining us today on this tutorial on Vlieseline Quilters Grid.